Bring on the sunlight and coconuts. Bring on the sunlight and coconuts. I had to zoom in my face for a minute to hit the OK button.
All right, folks. Good day, good day. We are, or you are viewing this, and we are taping this in the month of December 24. That is, holiday time. How are you, Dan, the healing man?
I'm doing great, Sharon. As you can see, it's time for me to shift into my holiday Hawaiian shirts, and I'm wearing one today.
All
because
right. What does that
mean? It would be silly, not that I wouldn't do it anyways in the middle of summer. This is the time to wear them, though, to celebrate the first snowfall. We just had our first snowfall here.
Oh, y'all did?
We did.
Okay. Well, when it's snowing, it really isn't that cold. It is pretty. It's just when the snow fades away. If there's no rain to wash the streets, then the ice, and then it gets kind of messy. But I love looking at snow, but I'd rather not be in the snow climate.
Well, when I was living in the South, and my wife, who likes the Four Seasons, she would stay with me there during the winter months. And so I got her a snow globe. And I said, here, honey, shake this.
No, it's not the same thing. Oh, no. Well, folks, you can see we are enjoying ourselves. Welcome to Healing Me Before We. This podcast addresses our emotional drama and identifies what we bring to our relationships. We believe healing starts within first. So we bring to you a unique way of uncovering limiting beliefs about relationships by examining the common uses of cliches. My name is Sharon, the Heart Lady, relationship specialist, and this is your co-host, Dan, the Healing Man. How are you this week?
I'm doing great, Sharon. Titles are something that are often given to us, aren't they, in life? And someone gave me a title the other day, and I thought, wow, I really like that. He called me Dan the Sway Man. And I said, hey, I like that name. That sort of resonates with me. And it's shorter than Dan the Radical Healing Man.
What?
It's not as tongue-tie or twisting as the name. So I might go by Dan the Sway Man now.
Okay.
And
Dan the Sway Man. Tell us about Sway.
Sway is sending waves across the universe. And of course, the universe is always sending positive vibes, never negative vibes. The negative vibes come from within ourselves, or how we pick up them from others and perceive them in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, well, sweet. Now let's go ahead and say that again. Welcome your co-host, Dan the Sway Man.
Yeah.
He likes to sway to.
And there you go with that sunlight and coconuts music that often we don't even have playing out loud, and yet is within ourselves. So we can still sway whether we got that music going on outside of us or not.
Absolutely, and it's funny you said how you got your name. I got my name, Sharon the Heart Lady, actually for one of my former clients. She's such a sweetheart. And she was helping me with some social media stuff a couple of years back. And she says, well, okay, Heart Lady. And then she looked and she said, the Heart Lady. Everybody knows you as the Heart Lady because all you do is talk about healing the heart. That should be your name. And I was like, the Heart Lady. I like that. And then I was trying to, I think, get a website with a domain with using the Heart Lady. And I don't remember what happened to it. I think I had to switch or do something else. And the Heart Lady, if you ever know about going on domains, once you use it, then they want to charge you if you want to use it. So I just said, I'm going to add the E. And I said, I like that. So it's the Heart Lady, THEE, because the only one.
There you go.
So it fitted with my brand, and I could still keep Heart Lady. So it's the Heart Lady. So we have.
I gotcha.
We have shared how we got our names, and I think it's quite fitting at this time so people get to know us a little bit more. So
Mhm.
Dan, I know today we really don't have a cliche, but it is
No.
very relevant to what we do. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like, I think it's kind of like a part two from
Yes.
Gray Divorce. So what is
Yeah.
it today? Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, and we're making up our own cliches. How's
Yes, we
that?
are.
And so our cliche today is going from separate beds to separate accounts or bank accounts.
Separate beds to
Now,
separate
separate
banks.
beds may lead to separate bank accounts. That's a possibility,
Yes, it
depending on
does.
how that whole situation goes.
Yeah.
If one person in the relationship decides that they want to get a separate bed for whatever reasons, and the other person says, I want you to stay here, stay in my bed. And often, and it's connected to what we're going to talk about here today, is there's a sense of safety and security
Yes.
in that, right?
Yeah.
And the person
Absolutely.
doesn't want to be there by themselves.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about separate bank accounts versus shared bank accounts and checking accounts,
Yeah.
there's a connection there too, right? Because
Yeah.
we're unified. We're a team working together
Yes.
for a common goal, which could be family, buying a house, children. And so I think about my own story with me and Maggie. And when we first met, we didn't have a pot to piss in.
As
Okay.
they say,
So we came into the relationship without anything.
and you
And,
get
and so
together.
we pooled our resources of basically nothing
Mhm.
and brought them together to make something.
Yeah.
And
I,
here we have our house, that we built 30 years ago because of our desire to work together as a team. And
mm,
that's how we approached it, right?
yeah.
And I get that people may approach it differently because they may come into it as a second marriage or a third marriage, and
Mhm.
people might already have established themselves, right, in their
Right.
own way of having their own property, or they got to pay alimony, or they got to pay other bills
Right.
that they're responsible for when they come into this new relationship with someone else.
Yeah.
So that makes a difference right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, what was I gonna say?
Well, let me ask you a question. Did
Sure.
you and Donovan ever talk about whether you wanted to have a shared account or separate account when you guys were getting together?
Not when we were getting together, but
We
later
didn't
on.
either.
Yeah, not at the beginning when we got together, but later on, it definitely did show up. And as you know, I became a business owner, and he was a
Mhm,
business owner, so it just made sense.
mhm.
So yeah, so it kind of grew, just like how you and Maggie grew together, like you said, because we just shared the same story. When you first start out together, there's not much, but then as you grow and um, mature and understand a little bit more about finances, you'll see the wisdom in having joint and having separate, right? And so,
Mhm.
you
Oh,
know,
they call that the hybrid
the hybrid,
in the
absolutely,
article.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, you
Okay.
see how that happens. But, there's a lot of pros and cons to
Mhm.
having separate bank accounts. And the fact is, we know that the percentage of those couples that break up, those marriages that break up or end up in divorce, finances is a huge
Yes.
component to that. And even on our last episode, when we were talking about gray divorce, finances also played
Yes.
a huge uh, um, part in breaking up. So it's interesting why money has to do all of that. Money
Money
can manage it.
matters, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Money
it can manage
matters.
it.
It
Yeah,
does.
yeah. So
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, what money represents,
yeah,
right? Safety,
yeah,
security,
security.
those things that are important, right?
Yeah,
Especially
yeah,
when if in an initial relationship of marriage, two people are coming together and looking at it as we are together on this. Everything is ours. It's not yours and it's not mine.
yeah,
It's ours. And then when separation or divorce comes into play and you got to go to a lawyer, you got to have a mediator, all of a sudden now It's
What I
mine,
have and
it's
what you
hers,
have.
it's
Yeah,
his. Yeah.
yeah,
And even to the dog, right? Even to who gets the dog and all of that stuff.
yeah.
So things can get very complicated. And I don't know, we talk about this often with most of our topics. If one is necessarily right or wrong, and we often say it depends, and that is true, right? It depends on the two people coming into the relationship, where they come from and their own idea of money
Yeah,
and what money represents to them
yeah,
and how they want to share it
yeah,
with the other person
yeah,
or keep it for themselves in a way that they're allowed to still have their own autonomy, because I
yeah.
think autonomy comes into play, right, as well.
Absolutely.
Let's say, and I can share this with you because this is true for me. I have always made sure that I have 3 jobs in
Mm,
my life
mm.
because I wanted to make more money so I could justify my spending. Okay.
Spoken like a true woman.
So I could buy uh, a motorcycle, a camper, a hot tub, so the things that I wanted to buy that Maggie didn't really support.
Yeah.
She rode my motorcycle once. That was it. She didn't want to ride anymore. She went in the camper several times and then she just stopped doing that. And she doesn't like the hot tub. So there are 3 items, right,
Yeah.
that are pretty much mine exclusively.
There you go.
And that can be an issue when you have two people sharing all of their money together,
Yeah.
and one person feels like, hey, I'm kind of getting left out here in this scenario.
Yeah. So I think that that is what brings up a good point on the question whether or not you should share bank accounts or not. So if you are sharing bank accounts, then definitely boundaries should be in place or could be in place. I don't like to say should or judge people on how they want to do their accounts, but I think it's thoughtful if you decide to share accounts and there are boundaries as far as if you spend X amount of money, I need to know first. And then there's some real structure on how you're going to spend the money because there are different items and then all of a sudden you're at the store and there's you don't have insufficient funds. So it's important that we kind of that couples do discuss it. And
Mm.
also, you made me think of the fact that really, when couples decide to cohabitate or get married, living together, whichever terms you want to use, that it is important that during that pre-stage, before you
Mhm.
decide that finances, how we handling finances, how we handling our credit, and all of that should be discussed so that when you go in, money is not such a big issue, or
Mm.
finances is not such a big issue. I know my husband and I, we've come up with if you're spending X amount, then we need to check in with each other. If you're buying a particular big item, let's check in with each other and see how feasible it is. Because one or both of us may decide, hey, we're saving for a particular thing,
Mm.
and we want to make sure that we have X amount dollars available. So the one of the pros is making sure that we have that communication, that there is clarity, um, and then the opposite of that is that, it's total transparency, right? Some
Mhm.
people may not, some couples may not want to share everything that I buy. You have to know and see on the bank account, which can also cause. You spend how much on a pair of shoes? You spent, didn't you just buy a pair of shoes last week?
Oh, are you
Look
talking about
at
Hawaiian
that.
shirts?
You have how many shirts? You buying another one? It's like, did you?
Uh,
Why didn't you
Maggie,
pay the
yeah,
gas before you paid the light? It's if you get to like, okay, that
yeah,
transparency may be too much for each other. If again, you don't have boundaries set
yeah,
around it and you're not clear on what your financial
yes.
goals and priorities are.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I mean, I like what you're saying as far as like you have that freedom to buy certain things that maybe you have a, for lack of a better word, I must have a fetish for Hawaiian shirts, right? Because as much as Maggie tells me I can't have another one, it doesn't seem to stop me from buying them. And yeah, I'm up to over 50 of them.
Yeah.
And it comes down to the, that word wants and the needs, right? Is it a want or is it a need? And then it's all in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? Because for one person in the relationship, it's a want. For the other person, it's a need.
Yeah.
And so how do you come to that kind of agreement so that neither person in the relationship feels cheated, in the sense that if there are certain things that I want, I say this all the time. It's not about deserving them or not deserving them. I'm worthy of having these 50 Hawaiian shirts.
Because
Whether
that's what you
my
like.
wife Maggie thinks I deserve them or not. And so,
Hence
that's
the
what we're
3
talking about.
accounts. I bought this with my money.
Well, there you go. I mean,
women are like, if you're in a relationship, you're like, oh, your money is my money, our money is my money, and my money is my money.
well, there can be a lot of truth to what you just said in all of those things, right? And I know that money has been an issue for my wife and I because we didn't ever establish a budget. And I highly recommend a budget, that people establish a budget, even though I've never done it. And mostly the reason Maggie and I didn't do it, and we talked about this morning, is because we use it as a means of avoidance, right? We avoided then having some difficult conversations that we would have had if we said, we've got a clear budget of how we spend our money, where we spend it, what we buy, what we don't buy.
Yeah.
And so that was our way of avoiding conflict and not having these arguments.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, it worked very well, right? On the other hand, though, not so much, because avoiding things, as you and I know, eventually it's going to come back to bite you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
In some way, because somebody's going to be angry. Somebody's going to be resentful.
Yeah.
Somebody might even be bitter. Somebody might even want to go to separate bedrooms, because of it. Because, and that was talked about last time too. The podcast of Separate Bedrooms, it could be about things like unspoken anger around money issues.
That's right. Yeah, we did definitely discuss some people do that to avoid confrontation and conflict. Absolutely. And earlier you did mention something that I'd like to bring back up is the legalities. So some people may decide, hey, for legalities, let's combine our resources and in some case of an emergency, there's shared access. So that could be a good thing, right? But on the other side of that, when you have shared accounts, it could be more challenging when there is a division, right? When you're talking about separating your assets and so forth like that. So it really, really does mean that we should consider talking about this before we are ended up in some of these legalities and what should we do. And then of course it's a big thing, especially for younger folks, where they're not even thinking about sharing their accounts because I think the stats were like 43% of the Generation Z's, the Gen Zers, they're not sharing. 43 to 45, that's almost half of them will say, no, we are not sharing.
That is true.
Compared to the baby boomers like you and I, it was like 18%.
Yes.
It was like a thing. Of course, when we get married, we share the accounts. Of course.
Yeah, it was just a given, wasn't it? I mean, there was no conversation.
Yeah.
In the same way that, and I never told Maggie that she couldn't keep her maiden name. If she wanted to keep her, I think we're frozen.
Yeah, we were. Yeah,
we froze for a second. That happens.
Yes.
And so we take things for granted in the sense of tradition, right? And tradition says you share all of your resources. You're
Resources.
married now, you shared your resources. And I heard you say that originally you and Donovan, like me and Maggie, didn't really talk about it
Yeah.
until
Hmm.
there came a point in your relationship where you had your own business, he has his own business, and so now you want to have your own finances accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me and Maggie, that never happened because neither she nor I had established any kind of separate business venture. Ours is always and still is to today. We're together in everything.
Yeah.
So we're together in our fortune and we're together in our debt.
Yeah, and that doesn't go over well with millennials and what I know. Everybody's like, what your credit is like before we even start. They'll talk about the credit rather than talk about how to manage. So that's an interesting, thought. So yeah, some of the other pros for having separate bank accounts, it does protect you or your partner from the creditors. So that's a really a big thing.
True.
Um, what else did we say? Helps to protect you for worst case scenarios, right?
Yes.
Um, Also, some people just like their independence. They don't want to feel trapped. They don't want to, feel stuck. And then others, like others, want to stay on top of their finances. It reminds me of a couple who, um, she worked in the bank. Her
Mhm.
thing was finances, and
Mhm.
her husband was absolutely fine on her taking care of all the finances at home, at work. They had separate businesses. She was the financial head. He was the spender. And so she took control. And I think that that was a smart idea. So whomever is best with the numbers or best with the finances is saying, it's all good. We don't have to make it a major discrepancy and make it about the relationship. And my thing, I've always told my couples and my clients that y'all are angry at the situation, not at each other. And if we could get that clear, folks, that oftentimes our conflicts are about the situation, not about the person. And too often we take these and make this confrontation and make it very personal about the individual. And it has nothing to do with about the individual. It's the situation that or the circumstance that you're unhappy with. So it's easier to be able to work out how can we work out this situation rather than cussing and calling each other names and making this about the relationship rather than about the particular issue. And so money plays a big role in that. And so this is why we felt like it was necessary, especially since the holidays coming
Yes.
when people spend a little extra, or people may be setting more financial goals as the new year rolls around. And so this is a good time to really stop and take heed. What did we spend? Because I like what you said with budgets. I recently had told a couple that y'all need to set some budgets so you can stop arguing about the money. So go ahead and see what your immediate expenditures are necessary in order for you to live, and then have your miscellaneous. And then I did tell the young lady Dan, so maybe you should get another little job, maybe a part-time
Mm.
remote job or something like that, so that there isn't an argument about how much you spend on getting your hair and your nails and your other accessories that you particularly desire,
Mhm.
right? And she was like, that's not a bad idea. I know you're busy. She was someone who stayed home with her children to educate her children and to be there for them. And I was like, well, some remote jobs you can work while they're asleep.
That's true.
See how you can balance it out, or maybe you just work a couple days a week, 2, 3 days a week. So we came up with some other ideas that would really work. And so, I was proud of her when she called and said, "Hey, I got something," and now the finances. She feels a big release. Plus, she feels her own independence, and sometimes people need that in their relationships. Especially when they do everything together. Having that finance is something that they can control. And it also teaches them how to begin to manage and understand and allow money to work in their best interest.
Well, we are frozen again for a brief period, and that happens when we're doing these kinds of live broadcasts.
Yes.
And you and I made a decision a long time ago that we're going to do it raw and unedited, partly because we want to be authentic, and partly because we're being honest. We don't know how to do it
We're
any
not that
differently.
tech
We're
savvy
not
yet.
technologically savvy.
Yes.
And so, in closing for me today, I think budget is a very important thing. I
Yeah.
will agree with you. Avoiding things is not healthy because I know that it does not, in the long run, go well.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, even though Maggie and I made that decision not to ever have a budget, we
Mhm.
did it consensually, mostly out of fear. And fear is not the way to make decisions.
Yeah.
It's more important that we be, as you said earlier, we be transparent, we be honest with each other,
Vulnerable.
and
Mhm.
vulnerable as well. And some of it goes back to, as we talk about this all the time, our own upbringing.
Yeah.
Okay. And did we grow up in an environment of scarcity, of how we thought that there was never enough, right? And so I'm going to approach it then from a place of scarcity rather than somebody who came from plenty and had more than
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
They're going to approach it differently
Differently.
as far as how
Absolutely.
they want to have their resources and whether they want to share them. And I agree with you, hybrid. That may be the best way to go, right? There's hours together, and then one person has their account, the other person has their account, so they can each draw from their
Yeah.
own accounts, and they can also have a shared account. What a beautiful way. It's a win-win scenario
It's a win-win.
because each
Absolutely.
person is now responsible for his or her own and for the shared together.
Right.
That
And
would be my recommendation.
absolutely. And you know, Dan, healing me before we, you brought up a good fact that it's about, sometimes it's about the belief, what you were brought up with that you're bringing in, and that hadn't been discussed, you know, so the scarcity or the fact that money doesn't grow on trees, how you spend money, or the fact is we have plenty, buy what you want, get, you know, you've been getting, an expense account from you were 6 years old. You're used to spending money. So is that. And then you know what? You didn't say either is that that goes along that aligns with our last statement is that you may have been burnt by a former
Mm,
partner and you're
that's
saying
true.
like, hey, this is not going to happen to me,
Yeah.
you know, and then you want to be able to protect your children and children's assets.
Mhm.
So that's really, really important. So, you know, I agree with you. You, it would be wise and helpful to have a plan for shared expenses, you know, that really works. And and knowing who your beneficiaries are, and then keep important accounts. Maybe that could be in both names. Um, you know, and having separate accounts doesn't is there to protect you. Doesn't necessarily have to split you up, right?
I
And
agree. And
also,
then I could buy all the Hawaiian
oh,
shirts I wanted, and there would be no, conflict or disagreement.
right,
Because the whole idea of my money is okay.
yeah,
And the whole idea of her money is okay too.
okay, it's
And
okay,
then the concept of shared money is fine as well. So they all work.
yeah,
One's not to the detriment of the other.
yeah.
And what a beautiful approach that would be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And having shared money also uh, helps you plan for the future. You can have, you know, planning for the future and setting those goals. And that's always something that keeps you connected rather
Mhm.
than disconnected. So that's it, viewers. What do you think? Shared accounts or not shared accounts?
Yeah,
As Dan calls it, what's it called? Hybrid accounts?
yeah.
Individual accounts. Whatever works for you, as long as it works. If it doesn't work, consider some other options, right? And don't let finances, don't let money be a downfall. Money is a very positive energy. You just got to know how to let it flow.
What a beautiful money is energy. That's a great way to look at money.
All right. So comment, look forward to some more cliches as we move on to 2025. You know, Dan and I have said that when they're not that technical savvy, so we have brought these episodes very organic. It is what it is, but guess what? We're learning. And as we are approaching to the 2025, look for some, more sophisticated uh, YouTube episodes. It was like, what? They've grown. And that's what we want to share with you also, that we're growing.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping that you are growing and finding something that you enjoy. So comment and let us know, what do you think we can do, if you can have any extra support. But we got some things that we're thinking about too, planning for the future, right? Okay, folks. So that is it for our episode.
You got the
All right.
music? Surf's up.
All right, that's it from Dan the Sway Man and Sharon the Heart Lady. We look forward to talking with you soon. Have a great one.